Hello, dear listeners. Tonight, I invite you to enter a quiet space where the darkness seems to swallow all sounds and movements. In that scene, there is a seemingly harmless game, hide and seek. But imagine if that game took place in the middle of the night when the moonlight was dimmed behind the clouds and all around was the sound of the wind whistling softly in the bushes. Then what would happen? Tonight, I will tell you a ghost story called Hide and Seek Tonight. A story that started with a game but ended with a creepy mystery that until now, no one dares to mention. Are you ready? Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and don't look back. When I was young and lived in my grandmother's house, the heat was unbearable, so I had to go to my grandmother's place to avoid the sun. According to modern terms, that place was a slum. From east to west, there were narrow alleys that could only accommodate 3 people at most. Each alley had more than 10 families. The whole area was low-rise, of course. My grandmother had 6 daughters, so on the top floor, an even narrower space was cut out as a room. I still remember that my youngest son would stay upstairs during his graduation exam. It was damp and stuffy, and smelled of mold. Even though it was late autumn, staying there for a while would make me sweat profusely. Most of the houses were self-built. Although they were old and dilapidated, they were quite sturdy, but most of them didn't have enough light. Even during the day, you couldn't see your 5 fingers inside. However, for the people here, it was still better than a thatched house. Every alley from beginning to end always has 1 or 2 connecting places, like a big net, just like a field covering the ditch. The children of each family, regardless of their size, are all free range, playing marbles in the spring, throwing cards in the summer, playing tops in the fall, throwing snow in the winter. The children's minds only think about how to change the way they play. At that time, you can almost randomly see the little devils with sweaty heads and mud running around crazily. Sometimes they will bump into adults who are busy working. Parents occasionally scold them and don't have time to take care of them anymore. Of course, this type of terrain is the most suitable and easiest to play, of course, is hide and seek. And when it comes to hide and seek, I will immediately think of Xiao Yuan. Xiao Yun's entire family was not from this area. He and his mother, a thin and pale woman, moved next door to his grandmother's house. It turned out that the family there wanted to move to another area, so they rented the house to the mother and son. Xiao Yuan's mother was an extremely eccentric person. Regardless of spring, autumn, winter, or summer, she would always wear a small floral shirt and very thin brown trousers. Every day she would hold a handful of rice in her hand and call the hens she raised, which were even skinnier than her, like sticks. She didn't like to chat with the neighbors, but she often had to rely on weaving some bamboo products to sell to make money to support herself and her son, such as some brooms, rice buckets, hats, etc. Her face always showed an expression of indescribable suffering, like a patient with an illness that was difficult to describe, or like a child who was always waiting to be scolded. Her face was as yellow as rice, and her slightly dry blue lips also made people look extremely uncomfortable. Every time she saw her son return, her eyes could not hide her disgust and fear, but it was completely opposite to her caring actions. Xiao Yuan's mother's voice was always very low, like a veil covering her or echoing from underground. In the hot weather, it sounded like the chirping of cicadas about to die. Although this woman did not like to join in the bustle, you could often hear her and her son talking, but most of the time it was her talking and you could not hear her son reply. But occasionally you could hear a few sentences, because Xiao Yuan spent most of the day playing outside. Only at night, the two of them would talk together. There were a few times when I woke up to pee, heard some movement inside, so I leaned under their window to eavesdrop. But the content of the conversation was very strange, even confusing to me. Please forgive me. What other requests do you have? How long do you want to stay with me? Why don't you leave? For example, Xiao Yuan's answer was the same sentence over and over again. No, I was curious about this strange mother and son, but at that time the adults thought that children were very talkative, even if they told these stories to their grandmother or mother. At most, they would just lightly slap my butt, then jokingly admonish me, then go back to doing their own thing. 5- or 6-year-old children only had question marks in their minds and were curious about everything, so I paid attention to Xiao Yuan. The place where the grandmother lived was originally a dense forest. More than 100 years ago, at the end of the Qing dynasty, a few fishermen came ashore and chose this place to live. They also called this generation the Fang family school. As for why it was called that way, people had long been unable to explain the reason. It was just that they followed the footsteps of the previous generations. In this area, children from 5 to 8 or 9 years old could grab a big bundle at a time, so naturally, playing was indispensable. Because everyone's family background was not very different, they were all not rich, and the children from poor families seemed to naturally like to help each other. Therefore, Xiao Yuan had not been here for a few days and had gotten used to everyone. It was just that he was a bit strange. Xiao Yuan's head was very large, and his features were strange, almost flat without any undulations. From afar, it looked like a red balloon that had been blown up and then delicately painted over. On the large and round skull, there were a few strands of wet hair. Under the thin and white scalp that looked like cloth that had been washed with bleach many times, purple blood vessels the size of straws could be clearly seen. His eyes were very small, and his sparse eyelashes made people almost feel like his eyes were like 2 beans stuffed into a handful of flour. But he liked to squint when talking. His nose was not high, wide, and short, and was slightly sunken at the bottom. His thick lips were slightly raised, always looking like he was swallowing a bitter pill. Although Xiao Yuan's mother herself did not eat rice, she still had to make sure that her son had meat and fish every day. She was really too poor. She went to the nearby lake with her bare hands to catch a few toads to cook for Xiao Yuan to eat, even though her hands were injured by the venom excreted by the toad's skin. So we kids were extremely jealous of him. Moreover, he didn't like to talk much, but every time he spoke, he was like an adult, always teaching us kids his age, and everyone was especially convinced by his words. Xiao Yuan's exposed skin was always swollen and semi-transparent, like pigskin torn very thinly. His hands were always wet. Every time I held his hand, it felt smooth, like holding a bar of soap. Almost every time we played hide and seek, he could always find us, no matter where we hid. Under a tricycle, in a bamboo basket, in a small dark room, or up a big tree. Every time we thought we had escaped to the end of the world, but it didn't take long before we were discovered. Moreover, every time like that, Xiao Yuan would appear behind you, heavily pat your shoulder, then coldly laugh and say, "I saw you." According to the rules, the one who was caught would have to hide, but Xiao Yuan didn't seem to like hiding, and everyone was happy to let him catch him. But this kind of game, once the balance was lost, the number of times he was caught would be too much. It would no longer be interesting. When Xiao Yuan enthusiastically invited everyone to play again, he was met with disdainful glances from everyone. The children immediately dispersed, leaving only me alone. And he once again squinted at the backs, walking away without saying anything. "Why do you always find us?" He and I were on the same path, so of course I asked him. "You guys are so stupid, those places I have hidden countless times before." His answer was still extremely impolite, but I was used to it. "Then, is there any way to make it so that the person who wants to capture you can never find you?" Before arriving at the house, Xiao Yuan was about to push open the wooden door and go inside. I asked him again. This time, Xiao Yuan did not answer immediately, but retracted the hand that pushed the wooden door. He walked in front of me with a grin, stretched out both hands, and placed his thumb lightly on my eyes. "Blind its eyes, just like that. Press down hard with your thumb. It will not be able to find you anymore." His words were like a drill, and he really started to exert force on his hands. My eyes quickly felt a sense of oppression. I, who was over 5 years old, naturally cried loudly. Xiao Yuan also seemed to realize that something was wrong, immediately withdrew his hand and went into the house, leaving me alone to carefully rub my eyes that were pressed painfully. That night, I finally fell asleep very late. My ears could no longer hear my grandmother and mother talking in their sleep, like folk songs to coax me to sleep. Only Xiao Yuan's words kept lingering. Blind his eyes. What a freak. I turned over, suddenly feeling that tonight was a bit hot. The night wind should have been very cool, but now the wind was terribly weak. Suddenly, my lower body tensed up. I had to pee a little. I got up from the bamboo bed, rubbed my still slightly sore eyes, and pee. I had said before the alley of the Fang family school was very narrow. In the summer, the houses were like steamers. Everyone brought beds and bamboo mats to spread outside to avoid the heat. My grandmother's house was at the end of the alley, and here each house and household did not have a toilet. Adults had to walk more than 100 meters to the public toilet. As for the children, they were all the same in the sewers next door to deal with it temporarily. I got down from the bed and found that the moon had already risen. Because there were many things, I carefully avoided the piled-up clutter and suddenly found the neighbors sleeping outside. I didn't pay much attention before, maybe my eyes hurt a little that day, so I looked unnaturally. From where I stood, stretching straight down, there were several people lying outside the door of each house. Everyone was motionless, like goods piled up, unable to recognize the boundary. The silver moonlight penetrated through the cracks of the old, dilapidated plastic tent and shone on their bare muscles, reflecting a strange light. I saw a plastic mannequin factory nearby, a place that specialized in making models for clothing stores. That day, when they were unloading goods, the wind was strong, and piles of naked mannequins were lying on the open ground, just like now. When I was young, I was a little surprised, and I almost couldn't tell whether the things lying on the ground were real people or not. But when I finished peeing, I noticed that only Xiao Yuan's family didn't have anyone sleeping outside, and since they moved in, no matter how hot the weather was, they had never slept outside, always finishing dinner and going inside to close the door early. I was about to go over there to see what was going on, but the door suddenly creaked open. A figure bent his waist and slipped in from the crack of the door, then stood up straight and closed the door again. I quickly squatted beside a bamboo building, took a closer look, and it turned out to be Xiao Yuan's mother. Her side face was turned towards me, exuding an uncontrollable sense of excitement and release, like a prisoner who had just finished his sentence and was released, and like a gambler who was concerned about the outcome. In her hand, she carried a small cloth bag. When she and Xiao Yuan moved in, she also carried this. The woman seemed to be uneasy and looked inside for a bit, then carefully walked past the person lying in the alley. But it wasn't an easy task either. She seemed to hesitate a bit, naturally choosing to go out from the alley on my side. Then she passed by where I was hiding, disappearing into the darkness. Fortunately, perhaps she was in a hurry to leave and didn't pay any attention to me. But when I was extremely surprised why she would leave so carefully at night, the closed wooden door opened again. Xiao Yuan walked out from inside. His eyes were not as small as they had been during the day. Instead, they were shining, like a cat's eyes. "You can't go. I like to play hide and seek the most." Xie Yuan's voice was very low, but it sounded like the voice of a grown man, just like him and my grandfather. Immediately after, he sneaked into the house. I was a little scared. The previous feeling of heat was swept away. I rubbed the goosebumps on my arms and crawled into bed. On the second morning, I was woken up by my family and was about to wash my face and get ready for breakfast when I found Xiao Yuan's mother holding a bowl of noodles with fried egg on it and giving it to Xiao Yuan, who was sitting on the bench. Xiao Yuan's expression was very pleased. He took the bowl of noodles. But I saw the noodles clearly giving off steam, but Xiao Yuan was not afraid of the heat as he ate each mouthful and almost didn't bother to swallow. In the blink of an eye, the noodles were already in his stomach and the bowl was empty. But Xiao Yuan's mother didn't seem surprised either. She just resentfully took the empty bowl, bit her lips, and after Xiao Yuan finished eating, he quickly ran out. And before leaving, he told me to eat quickly and go play with him. I felt that what happened last night was completely unreal. Perhaps I was dreaming. It had never happened at all. At that moment, I comforted myself like that. A few days passed, the summer temperature began to recede, and my happy time at my maternal grandparents' house had to end. Counting on my fingers, I counted to tomorrow, and when Xiao Yuan heard that I was leaving, he only made an "oh" sound, and then invited everyone to play hide and seek. When the kids had nothing else to play, they would play with him. Of course, the result was obvious. The whole afternoon was Xiao Yuan catching people, and not a single one was left out, and I naturally went home with Xiao Yuan in the grumbling of my friends. After dinner, everyone went to bed very early. In the middle of the night, the wind suddenly turned cold, like an iron knife cutting flesh. I closed my eyes and groped for the blanket for a while, but couldn't find it, and ended up touching something round like a meatball. As soon as I opened my eyes and looked, I found Xiao Yuan squatting beside my bed, and my hand was touching his head. He was staring at me with his eyes and nostrils flaring. Of course, I was scared and cried out, but very quickly he used his hand to cover my mouth. "Follow me." After he finished speaking, he turned around and walked out, and I was like possessed. I actually followed him. The bustling street during the day was now deserted and quiet. In those years, there were no night shops like bars, internet cafes, even TVs were a luxury for a few people during this time. Outside, except for the night watchman, there was not even a single ghost. The footsteps of me and Xiao Yuan lingered around the asphalt road, still carrying the residual heat. He was walking slowly in front, not knowing how long it had been, walking out of the Fang family school. There was also the food station and the free shop. "Where are you going in the end?" I couldn't help but ask him. "Looking for someone. She wants to play hide and seek with me." He didn't turn his head, walking as before. "Looking for someone?" I muttered, but this time Xiao Yuan didn't answer. Only in front he chuckled a few times. His plump shoulders shook twice, causing the excess flesh behind his neck to pile up. I don't know how long I walked. I was almost tired and wanted to close my eyes. Then I bumped into Xiao Yuan. It turned out he stopped. "You know you can't escape." Xiao Yuan suddenly spoke. I was extremely surprised. Then I realized he wasn't talking to me. The person he was talking to was a person curled up, hiding next to a small grocery store that had already closed. "I will follow you for the rest of my life." Xiao Yuan continued. This place was an intersection connecting the main road outside with the residential area. There was no one on the left or right. I have to try anyway. The person suddenly stood up, carrying a bag of clothes in his hand. It turned out to be Xiao Yan's mother. "You have to leave tomorrow, right?" Xiao Yun suddenly turned his head, looking at me with a smile. I nodded absent-mindedly. "Here, only you treat me the best." Xiao Yun suddenly reached out his hand like an elder reaching out to touch my head. "What do you want to do again?" The woman suddenly cried out shrilly, like the sound of fingers scratching on a blackboard. Xiao Yuan's hand stopped in midair. I don't know why. I instinctively felt that Xiao Yuan was extremely dangerous at this moment. I ran to the woman's side. The woman pushed me behind her. "I hate this body." Xiao Yuan held his head with both hands and said softly, "Why do you always play hide and seek with me? I told you you can't beat me, no matter where you hide. I can find you." Xiao Yuan held his hands in a protective gesture. and walked towards me. I could clearly feel the woman trembling. "Hide, hide, then I'll come find you again. I told you, I like finding people to hide from me the most." Xiao Yuan grinned as he walked over. "Go quickly, don't let it find us." The woman reached out and pulled me to run on the deserted street. Turning around to look, Xiao Yuan was still standing there without moving, only reaching out his hand towards us. We ran to several places, but in reality, every time we hadn't even had time to sit still, Xiao Yuan would slowly walk out from the darkness. "I'm coming to find you again. Run away, run away." The woman heard as if she had gone crazy and pulled me to run again. I don't know how long we ran, but the woman and I both had no more strength and were practically being dragged behind by her. The two of us leaned against the iron railing of the walkway, gasping for breath. "Can't run anymore?" Xiao Yuan stuck his head out from the gap between the iron railings, smiling foolishly. "I won't run anymore." The woman didn't know where she got the strength from, but she suddenly stretched out her two hands to press down on Xiao Yuan's neck, pulling him to the ground, but Xiao Yuan still smiled as before. "I only buy and sell things. I have never killed anyone. I have never killed anyone. I have tolerated you enough. You are the first." "The first? No way." Xiao Yuan's voice was squeezed to the point of being deaf, shrill like a water valve about to shut off. "Blind him. He won't be able to find me again." I don't know why, but I suddenly remembered these words and I couldn't help but say them out loud. The woman seemed to suddenly understand something, and she really reached out her thumb and pressed it towards Xiao Yuan's eye socket. A stream of fresh blood shot out from her eye socket, splashing all over the woman's body. But Xiao Yuan laughed as if he wasn't in pain and didn't put up any resistance. After a while, Xiao Yuan really lay motionless on the ground. The woman also used all her remaining strength to pull me and continued running forward. While running, she spoke sarcastically. I turned my head to look back. Xiao Yuan was lying there motionless. Finally, she and I had run out of time, paralyzed, and fell to the ground, gasping for breath. The woman's voice seemed to have recovered. "I just saved your life, little boy." She turned her head and said proudly, "Isn't Xiao Yuan your son?" I adjusted my breathing, wondering why they could be like this. "He's not my son." The woman frowned, her expression like an evil spirit, her fists clenched. "I originally thought he was just a commodity. I didn't expect him to be like a dog-skin patch that couldn't escape." She continued to speak resentfully, but when she turned her head and saw my clueless expression, she couldn't help but wave her hand. "Why would I tell you this, you little devil don't understand?" She stood up, stretching her waist. "Probably won't see it again. Every day we talk about playing hide and seek, you damn devil. I'll blind you and see how you can find me." After saying that, she suddenly narrowed her eyes and looked at me like a hungry devil looking at food, causing me to continuously retreat 2 steps. "Come with me. I'll take you out to play." She reached out her hand towards me. I desperately shook my head and retreated. She angrily scolded me, not paying attention to me anymore. "Where are you going?" I saw her turn around, suddenly bending over with great difficulty. "You don't need to worry." She moved her neck a little strangely. "Why does my hair feel like it's being pulled like this?" I suddenly discovered a plump white hand stretched out from the woman's neck, full of green veins like the meridians on dry leaves, so I raised my head to look. Another Xiao Yuan's heavy body pressed on the woman's back, smiling exaggeratedly, one hand gripping the woman's hair, the other hand placed on his mouth, making a silent gesture towards me. However, I felt a little uneasy because there were no wounds on Xiao Yuan's face, but the woman's hand just now was clearly still bleeding. The woman seemed to be completely unaware and walked forward along the street, not even a few steps, and turned her neck again. "Wherever I go, I can find you." Suddenly, a whisper-like voice penetrated my ears. That voice was Xiao Yuan's. I hadn't returned home, but I still sat there until dawn, because my legs were a little weak. When I returned home in the morning, I was scolded. My grandmother and mother were scared. But fortunately, nothing happened to me, so of course it was over. Not long after, I heard that the police came here holding a wanted poster looking for Xiao Yuan's mother, or more appropriately, that woman. Who is that person? I asked my mother. That woman was a human trafficker, specializing in trafficking children of several years old, about the size of a child. She tricked the children into gathering them together, dragging them to the countryside to sell. But one night, the driver fell asleep. The car flipped into the river. All the children drowned, and they were only discovered a few days later when they were pulled up. Their heads were swollen like buns. The veins on their heads were bulging. More than a dozen children. Their lips were purple. Their eyes were pressed down by the swollen scalp on their foreheads. Their skin was as transparent as a radish. That day, the police told everyone about the wanted notice and what had happened. Then everyone knew that woman was such a cruel person. She herself had children and did this kind of thing that harmed the heavens. It was a pity that they had not caught her. Mother angrily explained. Xiao Yuan is not her child, I suddenly said. Mom was a little confused, but continued. Never mind her anyway. The police said that before she was reported, she seemed to have tricked a child, and she often carried it with her, probably wanting to adopt it as a son. She has done so many bad things, perhaps she won't be able to give birth again. Mom scolded again. After saying that, Mom hurriedly went to do her own thing, and later went to her grandmother's house. That house already had someone else, but that woman was nowhere to be seen. And later, she accidentally heard the neighbors gossiping. In another place, she had seen a skinny woman carrying a big-headed son. But she still couldn't catch them. These two people were like playing hide-and-seek with the police. After that, I often had the same dream. In my dream, I saw a group of children playing hide-and-seek from afar. The children laughed and hid. Only one turned his back to everyone and rested his head on his arm, leaning against the wall. I also happily walked towards the direction they wanted to join. The child leaning against the wall suddenly turned his head. He had no eyes. Only a patch of dried blood in the eye sockets, tightly pulling his eyelids and forehead, forming several deep wrinkles like grooves. That face was Xiao Yuan's face. In the dream, I was so scared that I retreated step by step. The children hiding before suddenly came out from their hiding places, slowly walking towards me. They were all Xiao Yuan. All had the same appearance, big and fat heads, swollen eyes, blue and purple lips, and wet bodies. Come play hide and seek, they all shouted innocently. I woke up from the dream with a start, my whole body covered in sweat. It seemed that I understood why that woman could not escape from Xiao Yuan no matter what.